Hello and welcome everybody back to Swift Start Go, the podcast. I'm your host, Caroline Holden, and today I am so excited to bring a very good friend of mine, Darren Culbreath, here to talk about his work in AI. So hi, Darren. Thank you so much for coming.
Hey, Carolyn. Hey, thank you for having me. Really appreciate the time today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm first going to just read an introduction for you. Is that all
Okay,
right?
that's
Okay.
fine.
Darren is an accomplished technology executive with over 2 decades of experience driving application and cloud modernization, digital transformation, and emerging technologies. Throughout his career, Darren has held leadership position at Fortune 50 companies, including being the former head of GSI application modernization and cloud transformation at Google. That's a mouthful. In addition to other roles at National Geographic, USPTO, and DXC Technology. He is currently the Associate Director of Generative AI Labs and Cloud Native Labs at HCL Tech. So, Darren, what did I miss about you? What does our audience need to know about you today in order to fully grasp what we're doing today?
Well, the thing I would want to tell everyone is that I started this journey a while ago, and there was no such thing as AI in the enterprise. And my initial programming gig started at 14 years old for the Board of Education in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Wow.
And I've just been doing it ever since. I've got a love for technology, but I also have a love for creativity. I'm just headed off right after this wonderful podcast with Carolyn to a music jam session with a few friends. And that's really the biggest thing that I can say about me is I'm a creative person. And AI and generative AI has just sprung up so many reasons to be creative, especially not in my personal life, but absolutely in the enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the mix of the creative background and the tech background, because that's where we align, because I have the comedy and the acting and all of that
Sure, sure.
type of stuff. And I feel like that's why Darren's helped me a little bit on some of my projects, including my old startup Home Surfing. And I feel like that's where we really clicked when we were working together on a few projects. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Awesome. Okay. Well, my first question for you is really, I know you can't tell us everything, but I would love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing at HCL Tech, and mostly in the AI space, as this is an AI focused podcast. And if you can share what are the types of projects that you're working on, and maybe a little bit more about what are enterprises doing when it comes to AI, if anything at all.
Sure, sure. Let me unpack that a little bit. First, HCL Tech. Just want to tell a little bit about the company, a small little tidbit about it. HCL Tech is known as being a global system integrator, but that's not really the roots. The roots of HCL Tech is really in engineering. Many things that we use today in enterprise from a software perspective and even hardware has been touched by HCL Tech. One of the reasons why I'm so attracted to go to HCL Tech was, again, because of the engineering part. Now, as we do talk to enterprises about generative AI, we sort of started about 2023, like when most companies did, especially during this explosion. And talking to enterprises in 2023 was a lot of pedestrian use cases. Hey, I've got some data and I want to be able to read it and I want to type something in and then something comes back. But that's kind of like how it started. But because HCL Tech has thousands of enterprise clients, mind you, from core engineering to many software excellence kind of projects, to the point where HCL Tech was already there in the enterprise. And so bringing generative AI to the enterprise was just yet another step up. And what that step up was to think about IT operations, for example. That was some of the early generative AI use cases where you would have a customer service agent to sort of help customer service representatives help customers with certain issues, have a knowledge base, that kind of thing. But underneath are the systems, the actual IT systems. And this is where HCL Tech had a lot of excellence. And so because of all that excellence and all those years of working on large on-premise information systems, you start to get this large acumen of how things work, how to automate, how to connect the dots. And when you started connecting the dots, this is where HCL Tech brought in something called AI Force. AI Force, not like, the force will be with you, but more so, more so you have a human workforce and you want to amplify how humans work with the AI force. And what does that mean exactly? So HCL Tech is specialized in bringing in platforms to leverage AI in those large IT operations, but then also commercial applications as well. So again, engineering as a foundation, and then start broadening off to more business solutions. And so I've worked with many companies with HCL Tech, primarily in solving real operational problems. Operational problems could be audits. You have to do audits in an organization. Audits are very cumbersome, takes a lot of different data points. And how do you operationalize that? Well, there's tools to do that. And generative AI has a huge play in working with companies that going from zero, they're very manual, to one where now there's automated and cognitive decisions are made in between, and those cognitive decisions are where AI sort of takes a place. And so recognizing this is where HCL Tech really is now starting to shine. This notion of you've got many business operational processes, they already exist. It could be at the IT stack, it could be at the marketing stack, it could be at the HR stack, it could be at different levels. And this is
Mhm.
where we are working many times with clients to help them with those business processes. Kind of a long answer. I was trying to unpack it a little bit.
No, that was super helpful. I mean, if I'm breaking it down a little bit, it sounds like HCL Tech is very special and unique in the fact that they have been working with data and working with digital systems for a really long time, which made them uniquely positioned to tackle the AI market when it comes to enterprise companies and helping them with those like processes, because it was just the very much logical next step. And that now what you're finding to be the most useful use cases for these companies is finding ways to just better improve their operations, so that they're able to do audits, and so they're able.
That's
Is
one.
that right?
That's
One.
that's one, and you said it very well. That's one.
Yeah.
But also think about what the executives are really looking for. They
Yeah.
have many other problems. There are legal issues that come in play when you're working with generative AI.
Mhm.
And there are people issues when it comes to working with generative AI. Is this generative AI going to replace what I'm doing? How do I introduce this into the company? And so one of the great things that I think that HCL Tech has done has started to layer in even more steps. As of recent, just instantiated a responsible AI organization within HCL Tech to be able to help enterprises steer that very windy road as it pertains to introducing AI to the enterprise. So that's one. Two, this notion of what I work in AI labs, and so sometimes companies are here where they kind of just starting. And then we've got clients that are very much into it, very advanced. And so, from a labs perspective, we try to meet the clients where they are and we work with them on strategy. We work with them on implementation, this art of the possible. And so, trying to attack the different vectors as part of generative AI. But again, if once we start to see where enterprises need a lot more focus, like this new responsible AI organization within HCL Tech, we're morphing into what's sort of needed, but it's an everyday morph. It changes,
Yeah.
and this is changing every day. We have to keep up with so much.
You just mentioned what was that? Responsible
Responsible
AI.
AI.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Can you tell me more about what you think about when it comes to responsible AI and maybe what you guys are doing at HCL Tech in that space? I'm very curious to hear.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, I'm not the leader of the Responsible AI organization, but I'll tell you on some of the things that we think about. Number one, think in terms, Carolyn, of a developer.
Mhm.
Developer goes and takes a generative AI, maybe something off GitHub, and says, I'm going to give this a try and
Mhm.
for my organization. And they're at an organization, and that is their art of the possible exercise. The product person who's over such an application may be interacting with that developer, but the product person has had some sort of edict, if you will, some sort of thing that comes from the client that articulates, hey, by the way, this is how we actually should work against AI from a company policy perspective. So now you've got an executive view, you've got a product view, and you've got the developer. And now the developer needs to do something. And so where those policies might come from the executive perspective may not exist, and companies are hesitant. A CIO might be hesitant to say, go forth and code. And so instead of go forth and code, I need to know that we're number one, our employees are their interests are set, our customers' interests are in mind, and making sure that it's all part of a compliant flow for okay. And so when I build, I need to build with a responsible conscious. And that comes with the models that I might choose. So this think in terms if I have a large language model and I've tested it for bias, making sure that when I use it, it doesn't sway to one opinion or another opinion. It's kind of fair. But if I pick a model that sways towards another opinion, and yet I want to be fair minded to my users and my employees, I probably need to set policies. And those policies are sometimes small, but sometimes they're so wide that you need an organization, something like an HCL Tech, to sit with an executive team to help steer the company on all the different ways that they're going to implement AI in their organization because those policies don't exist. So that's where this new organization will sit and help, but it's wide span. It's not just code, but it's also the tools that I choose. It's also how I interact. If you look at many SaaS organizations now, I won't mention their names, but many of them have their own AI tools.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're a CIO and you've got 5 different enterprise AI tools to integrate into your system, what's your criteria?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where the responsible AI comes in, but it also comes down to a cloud architect. A cloud architect may have an idea of ingesting AI into some of their processes. Well,
Yeah.
what's the policy? Well, what policy should I do, or should I just do it? And
Mm-hmm.
so it encompasses a lot, and it all comes back down to, again, how do you steer from the top and be minded on all the different kinds of ways it's going to be implemented in the organization, and everyone looks up at that steering to say, hey, this is what we have to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've never really
So
explained it that way before, but it's all about being responsible. There you go.
it is. Well, and that was something that was a huge focus for us at Data Volo. So I haven't even caught up with you about my latest job things. I've already talked about it on this show, but the 5-second recap was I was working with data AI startup Data Volo. And so we worked with unstructured files and converted and ingested them into structured data that could be used for different enterprise AI or data projects and whatnot. And so we ended up selling to Snowflake in November. So that's the update there. So now I'm a free agent again. But a lot of what we were doing was making sure when you are ingesting and converting all of that data, being able to make it really, really easy for to establish like AI governance or policies or rules, and being able to source every single document and make all of those vectors and stuff. Make sure everything was really clear and that the data was really, really high quality. So as you were talking, I was just like, yep. This is exactly what we were talking about on a daily basis at Data Volo. So I think you nailed it.
Well, number one, congratulations on that.
Thank
And
you.
I promise you, next week it'll be different. There's so many things moving. But yeah, I think responsible AI, and again, around 2023 and maybe mid 2024, it was was a little bit of a happy talk conversation.
Yeah.
Everybody sort of thought about it. We kind of want it, but because now it's getting more ingrained into the organizations. It's a serious thing. So
Yeah.
kudos to your sell of the company, but I
Mhm.
think that also indicates the importance of, and companies are seeing the importance of integrating this thing called data and AI responsibly in the
Mhm.
organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of responsibility in AI, I imagine a major portion of that is also security, cybersecurity, and figuring out how to make these systems safer. Are there any things that you think in just in that frame of making safe AI systems and whatnot that executives at enterprise organizations should really be paying attention to? Any weak points or common misconceptions that you think people should be aware of?
Sure. I think I mean it's a big topic. So we can't
Yeah,
cover everything. But, let's start at the base.
yeah.
When I have a conversation with a client about the security aspects of bringing in a new application, for example, I definitely like to work with where the client is from their security posture today. Generative AI, what we try to do is not introduce new vulnerabilities. What we try to do is to build in place. For example, if you are a company that has to regulate against GDPR, and you have to make sure that your data, your customer data, is available at any given time and also safe and secure. Where if we brought in, let's say, for instance, a knowledge base, and this knowledge base is going to help, it's going to help HR do something, as an employee is going to use this. Well, that knowledge base, we would make sure that from a data loss prevention perspective, let's say making sure that Carolyn's name is not in it. Number one, there's no information in there about you. And we would not introduce a security vulnerability to put such a knowledge base in. And we would have safeguards and guardrails to make sure that your federal ID, all kinds of information would not be in. So, again, following the rules. So, generally, enterprises have a great foundational set of data governance and rules that's associated how to manage. Generative AI is nothing without data. It just
Yeah.
doesn't exist. And so we start at that level. And when we start at that level, we are very minded. And if there is any way that we have to introduce something into the organization, it's with the rules that are already there. And so, what I've always told folks is don't introduce new ways to sort of manage data and policies and security policies when bringing in these applications. It's really, again, following the foundational rules. Now, there it does open up some issues when people do build them. For example, data access. So imagine, Carolyn, this imaginary HR application that I'm talking about right now. Let's just stick with this for now. There's sensitive information on how to handle employees that maybe not every employee should see. Maybe they shouldn't see it. And so there is a sense of identity management that comes into a certain kind of information can only be seen by a certain role. But yet I have a knowledge base that's kind of open. And so we work with clients to lock those down. That way, data leakage isn't a problem. Cybersecurity could be a problem if, let's say, for instance, company A acquires company B, and company B could be publicly traded, and company A could be as well. Let's say this information is super secret and it cannot be seen past certain legal eyes until a certain time. There's SEC issues and so on and so on. But I have a knowledge base and it's in there. How many people should be able to see it? Then I need to control that list. And this is why access control matters, because sometimes people leak information not because they want to, but maybe by accident. or maybe the system allows, and it's not something that they wanted to do, but it happened. And so putting controls around data access internally really is a common practice. And I'm just talking about that part. The perimeter, those pieces of the data that actually comes in to your knowledge base or even an LLM. How did I get in there? My goodness gracious. So there's checks and balances that you have to do in order to make sure that the data comes in such a way that it is been cleaned from a content management perspective. All those rules apply.
Yeah.
And so, again, to make my life easier and to make my clients' lives easier, I start with how they work. And then if there is an introduction to information that needs to be locked down where generative AI is coming into the systems, then we talk about how to sort of lock them down, like this example of identity management.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I want to pivot a little bit.
Okay.
I want to ask you about education and AI.
Hmm.
And basically what we're seeing right now, just in the education space and in the tech world, is that there are now so many tools when it comes to AI that students are using, or that working professionals are using in order to learn new things or be able to write essays, or figure out ways to optimize people's work. I'm curious. There's a lot of tension among certain communities of some people saying, "Oh, AI is destroying everything. We need to use absolutely nothing," and then other people saying, "Oh, well, it doesn't really matter. They should just be using, learning all the tools because the tools are the future." So I'm curious
Hmm.
where you fall on the spectrum and what you think is maybe. Yeah, I'm wondering where you fall on the spectrum and what you think is important to learn, and maybe like what is important to take a step back from on occasion.
Yeah. Well, you know, we all have opinions, and but there are some facts. I do have a child in the school system now, but I can tell you a little bit about some volunteer work I've done for a school system as it
Mm-hmm.
pertains to AI. I went and had a conversation with them about a year ago or so, and the conversation was literally about how to introduce AI into the classroom and what's the right way to do it, and they're just kind of thinking it through a little bit. And part of that conversation was mixed with school policy. I'll give you an example, and it was mind blowing when I heard it. So one of the things was that introducing such a technology in a school system is not so easy as it sounds. New topics, great, wonderful. There's the one thing that I thought that was interesting that was blocking it was the school curriculum for teaching children, but from what the state provides. For example, if it's not part of the curriculum, you just can't add a class. You
Yeah.
just can't add a topic because it's all intertwined into the whole testing and
Mm-hmm.
certification if the child has a particular knowledge base or not. So that's one blocker. The policies and the curriculums themselves. Now, there's special programs in schools that would have maybe like a science division or something like that where
Mm-hmm.
people are tinkering around like in high schools, and so this particular school system has that. But yeah, one of the blockers was that. I just recently just got a phone call from that school system is and again, this is all volunteer kind of work here, but they just asked again the question, hey, should textbooks go in? And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you'd rather them look at the textbook than GPT, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Right? You
Probably.
probably would. And so that was kind of like my fast answer. So I think leaning towards putting textbooks knowledge into an AI tool for students to retrieve the information back in new and different ways seems to be on the table. What doesn't seem to be on the table still is the usage of some of these public AI tools because they feel like it's taking some of the critical thinking away from the student. And so it's still considered kind of a no-no. But, the real question is, what are students using at home? When they get home, I mean, are they absolutely not using these tools in high school? Are they absolutely not doing it? And so they're trying to find that balance. But definitely, I know what's on the table right now is textbooks are definitely being talked about. And the thing that is kind of hard to fix right now is, again, the set curriculum, that the thing that says you can't necessarily teach that yet. They gave me a compelling example. They said, "Hey, Darren, remember when Pluto was considered a planet or not a planet?" We were going back and forth. Well, whatever the final decision was, let's
Yeah.
say whatever it was, in the standardized test, if the old information is there,
Mhm.
and we know the new information, and the student puts on the new information in the test, it's still considered wrong.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
So imagine saying right now, guess what? We're going to be talking today about vector databases, and we're going to be talking about so on and so on. What do you mean that's not in the curriculum? So I think school systems have a lot of work to do. And I think every state's probably more flexible. They're probably more flexible than others. I think we're going to start seeing maybe a little bit of an imbalance. Maybe this state's going to be more progressive than another, but it's all going to come to a head because at some point, fast forward, Carolyn, I don't know, 5 years from now,
Yeah.
would you even be asking me that question 5 years
I
from
know.
now?
I know,
Right?
that's the question. And it's just, I think things are changing so fast. And it's also interesting because it really is like a state by state thing. So here in Minnesota, the University of Minnesota was really early when it came to developing the internet and different tools and things. There was this whole GopherNet like experience that people went through. But right now, the state of Minnesota's public schools are some of the worst schools when it comes to teaching anything about computer science
Oh,
in
I'm
the
sorry to
country,
hear that.
which is surprising because we have a lot of big Fortune 500 companies. We have a lot of companies who really need tech workers, but we don't necessarily have in the public school system the education needed in order to be competitive in that space, which is a bit unusual, I think, for a lot of blue states. But when you run into the rigidity of um, it makes sense because if you're making changes like that and it like affects the changes in testing or in like national standards that states need to meet, it's way more complex than I think people realize. But also it's frustrating when it's like, well, but how are we going to make sure that the next generation is like actually prepared?
Yeah, it's a thing. I
Mhm.
was just talking to my leader about this a couple days ago, and I'd mentioned to him that um, eh, kids today who are graduating, were going to graduate in computer science, have
Yeah.
decided, I don't know for sure. This AI thing is going to take over, and so
Yeah.
they're already there. Going back to now, so the kids know,
Yeah.
they know, they know, and so the internet is educating them anyway.
Hmm.
So if they want to know, that's what it is. So no matter what state you're in, it's just, it's like anything. If you don't remember, I don't remember it either, but I remember when in 2023, when generative AI was really being, exposed to what it
Hmm.
is right now, there was all of these articles about when teachers used to protest against having calculators in the classroom.
Yeah.
Now we're smiling, but that was a big deal, right?
Mhm.
It's just going to take away their critical thinking, and it's always going to be a thing. But now they have calculators ready for the children to use if they don't have one, right? And so who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen? All I know is that things are moving fast enough that what we used to believe 1 year ago, we're going to have to figure out how to keep it in a box and don't look at it. Just say that was very good. Everything's becoming a museum item within 5 or 6 months, every 5 or 6 months.
Yeah. All right. I've got one last question for you, and then I know you got to go and make some music. So, my question for you is, what are you most excited about when it comes to the AI space? Is there a specific use case that you are particularly interested in anything like that? Like, what is
I
making
think,
you light up these days?
you know, I'm glad you asked that question because I do ponder this a little bit. And it goes back to kind of like why I got in technology in the beginning. The first time I wrote a program all those years ago, I realized then that it was going to change the way we communicate and how we, as us, us human beings, and communicate. And you know, watching so many transformative ways that we communicate has really kept my interest. And the compelling thing that now AIs are going to communicate with each other, and how that will accelerate us, us as humans, is very, very, very compelling. And so I think what I'm most excited about is how humans and technology are going to be able to interact in ways that only was in science fiction. From being able to just give a phone call to your car and be like, hey, I need something from the grocery store, go and grab that for me. And it just goes and gets it and comes back, and it's like, this is great. um, Not that I want to just put all the stuff to work, but at the
Mhm.
same time, maybe you and I are having a conversation about something, and
Mhm.
something sensed in our conversation that maybe offered a little bit more clarity, and we both got a message that said, hey, Darren, you probably should have told this to Carolyn, and Carolyn, you probably should have asked Darren that. Oh, wow,
Mhm.
this ambient AI thing. I'm looking forward to the ambient part. And so right
Interesting.
now we are in the agentic AI part right
Yeah.
now. So agentic AI, you've got all these little cognitive little systems doing all these little great things. And HCL Tech is on the forefront of that technology.
Mhm.
But what's next? What's next is one day I'm going to be able to take this little piece of AI and I'm just going to stick it somewhere. And it's
Mhm.
just going to work. It's going to work against my SaaS applications. It's going to work. It's going to pay my bills. It's going to do all kinds of stuff. So I'm excited to work to get to those places again, how we
Mhm.
communicate, and it's and how ubiquitous can we make this AI. So
Yeah.
that's my excitement.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Is if
Thank you for
people
having
want to
me.
follow you on the internet online, where should they do so? Or are you a recluse? We're not coming and finding you.
Well, generally, just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find, up under an HCL Tech banner. If you've got any questions about anything I've talked about, knock on the door. If you got someone at HCL Tech you want to talk to, I can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Darren. And thank you, everybody, for watching or listening
Thank you.
today. If you liked this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe and share with your friends. We only just launched a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to continue bringing some incredible people just like Darren to come on the show to talk about what they're working on in the AI space and their thoughts on the future of AI. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Carolyn. Bye bye.